Well, we did it. 30 videos in 30 days. One video every day for 30 days. This is the 30th video. The best way to view all 30 videos is on my blog at weldmonger.com. I will link it up in the description. You'll also see some exclusive content there you can't find anywhere else. And that's also where you can enter the giveaway for the PrimeWeld TIG 225 if you haven't already. The deadline is August 31st midnight. We'll announce the winner on September 1. The first video of the 30-day series was just kind of a kickoff, a little bit of a preview on what was to come, which was a good mix of TIG, MIG, and stick. 70-18 in all positions. And there was even a 3-video series on TIG welding titanium, along with some great tips for TIG welding aluminum. The second video was a big eye-opener for a lot of people. It was the biggest mistake that you can make when welding titanium. There's a lot of talk about cleaning and argon shielding, but the worst thing you can do is weld it with the wrong rod. In other words, if you don't know it's titanium or you don't recognize it's titanium, it will turn into glass. The third video was a 2G aerospace type test on titanium that included some tips for passing a test like that, with some tight arc shots and some explanations on how not to blow the end away by backing up and tapering off before you get all the way to the end. The fourth video was the same test but 3G, vertical uphill. The thing about vertical uphill titanium, the rod is sticky, so you got to aim for the center of the puddle, the hot part of the puddle, and you got to figure out a nice way to prop and be comfortable and slide along evenly. Also with some really tight clear arc shots on how not to melt that end away but still get full penetration all the way to the very end and maintain good gas shielding for a silver weld. Then we shifted gears to aluminum and talked about how do you clean aluminum for TIG welding. If you light up on a dirty, nasty piece of aluminum without cleaning it, that cleaning action will do something. It'll help, but it won't do enough. Whereas if you clean it with the proper abrasive, with low RPMs and low pressure, you're going to get a lot better results. Cleaning the aluminum and having the right AC balance setting is not the only thing, though. Argon flow rate can also have an effect on cleaning action. My friend Andrew Carden came for a visit to film some videos with me, and we were noticing that something was just off a little bit. We weren't getting the cleanest aluminum welds, so we stopped and did this little spot test. And once we got it dialed in, the welds came out so much cleaner. Flow meter was off a little bit. So that got me to thinking on what effect would that have on a normal lap joint, on how the bead wet out on aluminum. And when you don't have enough flow rate, you don't get any cleaning action. And the bead acts like solder that doesn't have any flux, just doesn't wet out like it should. So a normal reaction would be to increase the cleaning action on the AC balance, when really all it was needed was a little more argon flow to let that cleaning action go where it needs to go, and let the bead flow out. If you are ever faced with taking a 5F tube-to-plate aluminum test, this next video is for you. Andrew had to go make a single weld in the field on aluminum to put a cap on the end of a line at a liquid natural gas facility, and he had to go take this test in order to qualify, and the test has to have complete fusion into the root of the joint. Not worried about a stack of dimes look. In fact, if you got that, you probably did it wrong. Next video is MIG welding overhead with the PrimeWeld MIG 180 on 115 volt. I used 2 different wire feed speed settings for this joint, one on each side. Then I did a macro etch test to check for penetration and bead profile. I like to do that, especially when the puddle is fresh on my mind. I can learn a lot. And everybody else can learn something too. I find it very instructive. You can guess all you want, but one test is worth 100 opinions. I did a few more MIG welds also, all using 115 volt. Not all MIG welders run good off 115 volt power. In fact, I have had some that as soon as I turned them on, they would pop a 15 amp breaker. I've got this one on a 20 amp breaker, and I have to work hard to pop that breaker. It's amazing what it'll do on 115 volt power. Sometimes I hook it up to 230, but I've got to run a cord all the way to the dryer room. The next joint is a 3F outside corner downhill. For 1/8 inch thick metal, I wouldn't hesitate to run it downhill. Once I get to 3/16 or so, I start thinking about going uphill. But 1/8, like 1/8 wall tubing, Downhill is pretty much the way to go. Video number 12 was also an outside corner joint, horizontal. Not really any different than a flat position. You don't really do anything different. You could either pull this one or push it. I showed both. Got complete penetration on each one. There are the settings. Video 13 was some aerospace weld test practice, 2G position. I always found it interesting that the aerospace code D17.1 allowed you to completely melt that end away. I never thought that's a really good idea because all aerospace parts have ends, and a lot of times you have to weld all the way up to the end without melting it away so that you could blend it off and maintain the dimension. Some companies only give a 1G, others give a 2G and a 3G for aerospace welding jobs. I showed all positions in this video because I know what it's like to sweat bullets when you're going to take a job and the job is on the line and you want that paycheck to feed your family. It's pressure. It's what we feel as adults that are trying to support a family. But if I can make it a little easier on somebody by giving a little more confidence, give them some tips on how to pass a test like this, then I'm happy to do that. Another tight, clear shot on how not to blow that end away. In video 15, I announced the winner of the Turbo Sharp tungsten grinder. Also talked a little bit about Sanitary stainless and some other jobs done with the PrimeWeld TIG 225, which is another giveaway we're doing during this 30-day video blitz. This is Andrew Carden using the PrimeWeld 225 to TIG weld some Sanitary stainless tubing. All about the purge, getting that silver weld on the inside. We also showed my friend Brad Goodman doing a pedal pump technique on an aluminum lap joint. Video 16 was how to TIG weld cold rolled steel, corner joints and lap joints. Outside corners are some of the most fun welds to make, but when you're getting to that end to keep from melting away, got to start backing off of that foot pedal, add a little extra rod and back in, taper off. For a lap joint, you kind of want to make sure that you're penetrating down into the root of that joint. And so you want to keep an eye on the front leading edge of that puddle and make sure it looks kind of like a teardrop like that to make sure you're getting into the root of the joint. As I often do, I did a macro etch test on this just to verify it. It got in there. Video 17 was how to use the effects of high-speed pulse when welding on an edge. When we think of welding, we think of joining two pieces together, but occasionally we have to do a build-up bead on the edge of something. Very common in aerospace, especially on nickel alloys and titanium for blade tip build-up. Very common operation on stuff much thinner than this. High-speed pulse can help you control that bead on an edge. Low-speed pulse, 1 to 2 pulses a second, can really help you control heat input, and that can help with preventing distortion. Video 18 was TIG brazing using pulse settings. 1 pulse a second with about a 30% background seemed to be just about perfect. Using lay wire technique, a 332 silicon bronze filler has proven to be a fairly bulletproof setup for TIG brazing with silicon bronze. Video number 19 is TIG welding aluminum, showing the pulsing with the pedal technique. This is my friend Brad Goodman doing the welding here. This is an 1/8 inch thick metal. Brad welds a lot of dog feeders, dog boxes. His customers want a certain look, and he's able to do it by pumping the pedal. Video number 20, an old timer once told me, overhead stick is just like flat, just upside down. So for an overhead T-joint, you can weld it with the same amperage that you can use flat or horizontal. You've just got to hold a tight arc. If you hold a long arc, things roll off the tracks. If you can hold a tight arc, you can utilize that arc force to push that weld up in there and help it flatten out and not fall out. Video number 21 is a 7018 2G. This video is intended for mainly for students because this is a very common joint that a student has to get through to work on to the next skill building exercise. Video number 22 is a socket weld in the overhead position, freehanding using a TIG finger. You try to do most of the welds in a tripod vise, but there's always a few welds you have to do in position. Sometimes you have to do an overhead weld. Oftentimes it's got a bunch of stuff around it. Oftentimes it's in a corner where you have to switch hands. We sort of pretended this weld was in a corner, so Andrew welded half of it with right hand, half of it with left. We cut it, sliced it, diced it, polished, etched it, and did a test to verify penetration. You can think you're penetrating, but there's nothing like a test to verify it. Video 23 is comparing short circuit MIG to pulse spray MIG uphill on a 3G plate. Pulse spray MIG requires a machine capable of doing pulse spray, also requires different gas. They look a lot alike on a vertical uphill, but they sound completely different. Sometimes it's just a matter of following the procedure. You have to do pulse spray when that's what's required. Video 24 was basic filler metal selection for TIG welding. Sometimes you don't have the option of choosing because the filler metal is specified in a welding procedure, but sometimes you're the one that selects the filler metal. This is a guide to help you do that. That video focused on carbon steel and chromoly, stainless steels, as well as aluminum, and also provided some links to some resources and downloads. Video 25 was walking the cup with a number 7 cup on a turntable. This was a 2-pass weld, and later on in this 30-day series I did a cut and etch test on this weld to verify penetration. Video number 26 was a 1/2 inch TIG socket weld stainless steel to carbon steel using 309 filler. This was also a 2-pass weld because socket welds require at least 2 passes. The codes require at least 2 passes. 27 was overhead welding with 332nd 7018, 90 to 95 amps doing the rooftop overhead position. This is my friend Matt Hayden doing the welding here. I'm behind the camera, showing a nice tight crisp arc shot, simple single pass weld, rooftop overhead. Video 28, 7018 5F tube to plate. The main thing on this test is getting complete penetration into the root of the joint. We used a 332nd 7018, 90 to 95 amps. This test is as much about body positioning and restarts as it is about anything. Video 29 are some tips for doing your own macro etch cut and etch test. We used some of the previous welds done in the previous videos, 1 carbon steel and 1 aluminum. We talked about the etchants and the polishing requirements for each. Most popular etchant for carbon steel is 5% nitrile, but Easy Off oven cleaner will etch aluminum and do a pretty good job on a cut and etch test. Video 30 is this one, but I will give you a little sneak preview on some new content I'm working on. It seems like everybody is struggling with vertical uphill MIG. This video should help.